Breaking news! Something strange is happening in Baltimore. Key players are disappearing. Front office moves are piling up. The salary cap is shifting like tectonic plates, and it's all happening too quietly, too perfectly timed, too calculated. Is a blockbuster trade already lined up behind the scenes? Is someone huge about to be shipped out or brought in? The silence from the Ravens facility is louder than ever, and trust me, that's not by accident. But before we dive into this rabbit hole, make sure you hit that like button if you're a true Ravens fan. It's always amazing to see fans of all ages supporting this team. And if you feel like it, comment, "Go Ravens." Let's see how many of us are still riding with this team no matter what happens next. Now, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you could change the way you look at this team moving forward. Let's dive straight into the madness that's taken over Baltimore this week. General Manager Eric DeCosta isn't just fiddling with the bottom of the roster. He's making deliberate, strategic moves that suggest something much bigger is on the horizon. With a disappointing 1-4 start to the season, the last thing Ravens Nation needed was stagnation. Fortunately, DeCosta has been anything but idle. He's clearing cap space, moving pieces, and setting the stage for a major play. And we now know, per John Harbaugh himself, that this isn't random. The Ravens have plans. The latest update puts Baltimore's current cap space at $14.27 million, the 14th most in the league. But what does that mean? Why are they clearing that space now? These aren't just throwaway moves. Take the recent trade of Odefoa, for example. In exchange, the Ravens added safety Alohi Gilman from the Chargers, a player who's logged 85% of defensive snaps over the past 2 seasons, and a 5th-round pick. Shedding Oa's contract alone freed up $8 million. That move wasn't about salary dump. It was about creating flexibility. Then there's the signing of C.J. Gardner-Johnson. At first glance, a flashy name like that might raise alarms about cap implications. But not this time. Thanks to his fully guaranteed 2025 salary from the Texans, his deal barely made a dent. DeCosta got a high-impact defensive player at a discount. And if you think that's the end of it, think again. DeCosta isn't done. When asked about the trade deadline, Harbaugh openly admitted the team is exploring options, especially on the defensive line. "I think so," he said, when pressed about adding a pass rusher. Baltimore isn't just open to trades, they're actively planning for them. 5 names have surfaced as potential targets: Jeffrey Simmons, Max Crosby, Kayvon Thibodeau, Trey Hendrickson, and Jaylon Phillips. All game-changing defenders, all on teams likely to be sellers at the deadline. Simmons, for instance, has a manageable $12.5 million cap hit. The Ravens could make that happen right now. Kayvon Thibodeau, just $3.5 million. That's rookie contract gold. Hendrickson, a bargain at $1.3 million. But could the Bengals really stomach trading him to a division rival? Now, Max Crosby would be a dream acquisition, but dreams come at a cost. In this case, $23.3 million. That would mean Baltimore needs to free up an additional $9 million. Not impossible, but it would require some serious contract restructuring or another trade. Enter names like Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, whose potential contract extensions could actually add cap space by lowering current year hits. But hold on, this goes even deeper. There's another angle at play here: long-term planning. This cap space isn't just about making flashy deadline trades. It could also be about setting the table for key player extensions. Kyle Hamilton just got his deal. Up next, possibly Isaiah Likely, Tyler Linderbaum, and Travis Jones. All 3 are rising stars. All 3 will cost money. This team is building not just for 2025, but for the next 3 to 5 years. Which brings us to the most shocking development of all: the growing whispers that Roquan Smith, yes, Roquan Smith, might be on the trade block. You heard that right. The same linebacker the Ravens gave up a 2nd and 5th round pick for in 2022. The same guy they rewarded with one of the richest contracts at his position. So why the sudden shift? For one, he hasn't looked like the same Roquan this season. Injuries have been a factor, and according to NFL analyst Kyle Krabs, the 2023 version of Roquan hasn't resurfaced. There's concern that his best football might be behind him, and when you're paying him like the 2nd best linebacker in the game, that becomes a serious problem. The financial side is also compelling. Trading Roquan would save Baltimore $3 million in 2025 and a massive $20 million in both 2026 and 2027. That's money you could redistribute toward multiple positions. And with the current roster needs, that flexibility could be crucial. So what could the Ravens realistically get for him? The original trade to acquire him cost a 2nd and 5th round pick. Now, a few years older and arguably underperforming, a fair return might be a 3rd rounder and a late pick, or possibly a starting caliber defender and a 7th round selection. Considering Baltimore's already well stocked with draft picks, it might be smarter to get a player who can contribute immediately, especially on the defensive line. Which teams could be interested? 3 stand out: the Dallas Cowboys, Indianapolis Colts, and Washington Commanders. Dallas might see him as the final piece for a playoff push. The Colts are outperforming expectations and could use linebacker help. Washington, despite having Bobby Wagner, needs a long-term solution. Roquan would fit seamlessly into Dan Quinn's system, but Roquan isn't the only Raven drawing interest. Mark Andrews, Tavius Robinson, Daniel Falale, Keaton Mitchell, and even Marlon Humphrey have been mentioned as possible trade chips. Andrews, a pillar of the offense, could fetch a huge return, though that would be a bitter pill for fans. Falale and Simpson, depth guys, yes, but with some trade value. Mitchell's underuse has frustrated fans, and it's not hard to imagine another team giving him the opportunity he clearly isn't getting in Baltimore. And Marlon Humphrey? Well, he's the wild card, the least likely of the group to be moved, but still not untouchable. His play has declined, and depending on the right offer, DeCosta might be willing to listen. Let's pick up right where we left off. The decisions Eric DeCosta makes in the coming weeks will define not only how the 2025 season ends, but potentially the next era of Ravens football. And while names like Max Crosby and Jeffrey Simmons steal the headlines, what's happening behind the scenes could be just as impactful, especially if DeCosta pulls the trigger on a move that shocks the fan base. Let's talk about the elephant in the room again, Roquan Smith. The moment that name hit the rumor mill, fans went into a frenzy. Some say trading him would be a massive mistake. Others argue it's a smart business move. The truth? It's complicated. Roquan is still one of the emotional leaders of this team. But if we're being honest, emotional leadership only takes you so far when the production doesn't match the paycheck. And right now, it doesn't. He's no longer playing like the elite linebacker he was when he first arrived. Whether that's due to scheme, injury, or simply regression, it's hard to ignore. But trading him mid-season? That's a massive shakeup. You don't trade your second best paid defensive player unless you have a clear vision of what comes next. Maybe that's a shift in defensive philosophy. Maybe that's a push for younger, cheaper talent. Or maybe it's part of a bigger picture, where Baltimore flips high-salary veterans and reinvests in rising stars like Kyle Hamilton, Linderbaum, and even Isaiah Likely. And speaking of Likely, don't be surprised if he's quietly becoming one of the building blocks of this new-look Ravens team. He's already flashed the kind of upside that could eventually make the front office question whether Mark Andrews is worth his price tag in a crowded cap landscape. Yes, trading Andrews would be painful, but pain doesn't scare DeCosta. And in today's NFL, teams are more willing than ever to part with popular veterans in order to prioritize flexibility and long-term competitiveness. But let's pause here, because we have to acknowledge just how valuable the current cap space situation is. $14.27 million isn't just a number, it's a weapon. Baltimore has more than enough to make a play for a top-tier defender today, without restructuring another single contract. Want Simmons? It's possible. Want Thibodeau? That's a cheap deal. Hendrickson or Phillips? Even more affordable. This is what we call being in position, and that's where the Ravens are. All the cap work they've done isn't for nothing. It's laying the groundwork for a calculated move. And what about Max Crosby? The dream scenario, right? Yes, it would take some extra maneuvering, but it's not out of reach. Restructure Lamar's deal, maybe offload one more depth piece, and suddenly Crosby's $23.3 million cap hit becomes manageable. That's the kind of splash move that sends a message to the rest of the AFC. The kind that says Baltimore isn't waiting for the offseason to figure things out. They're going for it now. Now let's shift to another major theme, the trade block inside the building. There are several Ravens who could be quietly dangled in front of other teams, and not just Roquan. Let's break down the rest of that list again. First, Mark Andrews. As mentioned, he's still elite, but with Likely in the wings and cap considerations looming, trading him could be one of the boldest and smartest moves of DeCosta's tenure. The return would be significant. A team in contention with a tight end problem would pay a premium, and Baltimore, with so many fifth-round picks and young offensive options, might be ready to listen. Then there's Tavius Robinson.